Welcome to our very first Story of Hope in our new series called Stories of Hope. I'm your host, Russell Daniel, pastor of Hutto Community Church, and so glad to be here with you tonight from the Fingerprint Ideas studio, where they take care of all your design, marketing, and print needs. And it's my pleasure to be here with Bob and Dori DuCharme. And you guys, I've been wanting to do this for several months now, and the Lord coincidentally has been working on you guys as well to be able to tell your story and where you've been and what God has done. And so, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you guys are here.
Thanks.
So, as we kind of go ahead and dive in tonight, love to hear more from you guys and just kind of walk this through from the beginning. So, Bob, why don't you start tonight and kind of tell us about home life growing up for you and what that was like?
Okay. Thanks, Russell. I appreciate the invite. I was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, right on the Mississippi River, and I am the oldest of what eventually became 8 kids. I have one biological brother. I have 4 step siblings, and I have 2 that technically I'm not related to because it was a stepmother and stepfather, but I was raised in what could be called chaos. The house was always in chaos. There was always something going on. When I was about, I would guess, 12 or 13 years old, my father went to my stepmother. Let me back up. Sorry. When I was a baby, when I was about 2 years old, my mother passed away, my birth mother. And I did not find out the real reason she passed away until my 18th birthday. I'll talk about that in a second. But my father remarried a wonderful lady who took my brother and I in like we were her own. Mm-hmm. They had 4 kids, and like I said, when I was about 12 or 13, they decided to divorce. I remember that day distinctly. I don't remember a lot about my childhood, but I remember that day distinctly because it was one of the happiest days of my life. My father was very abusive. He was physically abusive. He was verbally abusive. And on at least one occasion, he was sexually abusive to me. And that just caused a lot of problems in the future for me. Fast forward to my 18th birthday, my grandmother, my birth mother's mother, I stayed in contact with her a lot. She was a wonderful woman. She wanted to tell me the truth about what happened to my birth mother. And it basically, my father killed my mother by force feeding her Darvon, a strong narcotic that he had access to because he was a medical technician in the Air Force Reserves. And I don't know all the details, but he never went to prison for it. That caused me on my 18th birthday to become an extremely angry young man. And I carried that not only because of the abuse, but I carried that forward for many, 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 many years. And when I turned 18, I decided I am going to leave this chaos, and I joined the Air Force. So that's my, kind of my childhood, all the way up until I was 18 years old.
I mean, that's pretty rough background right there. That's not an easy start to life at all.
No. I didn't realize it until much later in life, probably within the last 10 years, how much it truly affected me and affected things that I ended up doing in my adult life. So yeah, it was rough. It was basically survival.
Yeah,
is what it was.
Yeah. Dori, how about your early life? What was that like?
Mine was a little different. We grew up in Florida, very poor, very poor. Lived in travel trailers and mobile homes, and, always lived in trailer parks. Had a mom and dad. They stayed married until, I was grown, but my father was extremely abusive. He was Jehovah's Witness. We were raised Jehovah's Witness, which kind of brought a whole different dynamic into the family because my mother was not, my dad was, so there was always conflict.
And what was your mother?
Nothing. She was kind of agnostic, I guess, looking back on it now. But I grew up very conflicted because my father would tell me, this. My mother would say just completely opposite. Just ridiculous things.
Yeah.
So, we were poor, but not miserable until we moved to Alabama. And once we moved there, we lived with my grandmother, grandfather, uncle.
What precipitated that, if you don't mind me asking?
I know now, we left in the middle of the night. I was 8 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
Left in the middle of the night, not given a reason, travel trailer behind us and left. I now know, since my father's passed, that he was in the mafia and he was running, is what it was. So I found out all those kind of interesting details when he died, but it makes sense now. So we ran to Alabama because that's where my dad was from and moved to the family property. And that's when I started being abused by my uncle from, the time I was 9 till I was 15.
Wow.
My mother knew but wouldn't leave. She wasn't strong enough to leave. So I, went through with all of that for years and years until we moved to Pensacola. And that was like, oh my gosh, I'm finally safe. And, finished high school, wanted to get out of the cult, honestly.
The Jehovah's
That
Witness.
was the Jehovah's Witness family that I was in.
Yeah.
And so I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to get out of that house. So I started dating this guy that my friend set up with me. He was a miserable human being, and I knew it, but I was so desperate to get out. And I got pregnant 2 months after dating him. Got married at 17, because that was the thing to do.
Right.
You didn't
That was
bring shame.
the right thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after that, I never looked back as far as home life. But that was just beginning the nightmare, pretty much.
So, Dori, would you move that mic a little closer
Yeah.
to you? There you go. And then just kind of take us through what happened after that. So now you're married, you've got a kid on the way.
Married, kid on the way, finished high school, getting ready to finish high school with a kid. Things went south because I trapped him. I mean, he felt trapped.
Yeah.
And so, bad situation happened there, very bad. And he got custody of my son, so I didn't have him. Parents weren't willing to help. My mother actually, she kind of was what started the whole thing with the divorce. She, just took sides with him.
Yeah.
So I had no one. And what I did is I went with another man, of course, because that's just...
So at this point in your life, you're not a believer in Christ at all.
Not at all.
This is furthest thing from your mind.
I always questioned when I was in the Jehovah's Witness. I would always ask questions, but I was always told, you don't question anything. You just do it. So I always knew. It's like I always knew there was something out there, even at that young age. I knew it, but I didn't know what it was.
Right.
So I just went from there to Church of Christ, got burned by them.
And what was that like? Same thing?
It was, I was active in the Church of Christ, but it was, you don't ask questions. You don't. And I had questions because I wanted to understand the Bible or whatever. I didn't know even what the Bible was because we didn't have a Bible. Jehovah's Witness didn't. Church of Christ, you just behave, put your head down, and do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And of course, that marriage didn't work, so divorced him, and life went on.
And there you are.
Yeah.
So Bob, catch us up on your story a little bit. And, so 18, not good.
Yep.
I mean, you can't wait to get away. So what do you do?
And just as a point, I was raised in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And I was taught that it was always faith by fear, not faith by love. Mm-hmm. The priests during that time in the 60s and early 70s tended to be a lot more strict. I did go to Catholic school for a year or two, I think. And I remember one of the worst beatings I ever got in my life was from a nun. She was about 4'5", and she beat the living tar out of me because I talked in her class. But I believed there was a God. I always believed in God, but I never had a relationship with God. Joined the Air Force and went to basic training, went to my tech school, and I got stationed in Minot, North Dakota, one of the coldest places in the lower 48. And I met my first wife. And it was, I was, finding out later through lots of counseling, I was always looking for someone to be with me. And it was interesting because I went to the girls' dorm to date, to try to ask this girl out on a date, and she was already dating somebody, and who ended up being my first wife was her roommate. So I turned to her and I asked her out, and 3 or 4 months later we were married. That quick. I was 19, she was 18. Farm boy from Wisconsin. She was Italian girl from Brooklyn. Couldn't be two further worlds apart. And we were together for about 3 years, and I approached her with the idea of starting a family, and she rejected that. And so, again, finding this out through many hours of counseling, I carried this deep-seated feeling of rejection because of my father. My father basically rejected me. And so as soon as somebody would reject me, I would run. And so I left, and we got divorced, and almost immediately I met my second wife. And because we got married because she wanted to have kids. It's interesting to look back on it now because we didn't get along at all. But we had 2 sons together.
And you found acceptance there.
I found acceptance for a little while.
Right.
And like I said, two wonderful sons. And after 8 years, again, there was a form of rejection there. So, boom, I ran.
There you go again.
Yeah. And shortly thereafter, I met my third wife, who, again, from my counseling, I figured out that she was like the mother I never had. I felt very safe with her. She came from a very stable family. I always loved going to visit her family because it was this great family dynamic, which I never had.
Right.
But again, after 12 years, rejection, and I ran. And, the military didn't make it extremely easy. I was never in difficult situations. I was never deployed. I was never in any sort of danger. But the military's the military.
And they're going to move you around.
They're going to move us around. Yeah. The longest time I was ever stationed in one place was 4 years.
Wow.
And which
did that make it easier to run?
very much so, which is actually mirrors my childhood because best that I can recall, we moved in my 18 years of life in Wisconsin, we moved 17 times.
Whoa.
And what I found out was, again, after losing my father, that we were constantly running because of unpaid rent, or we were very poor as well. We didn't live in travel trailers, but we didn't live in great places either.
Yeah.
There were times when, dinner might be a mayonnaise sandwich. But yes, your point about making it easier to run, yeah, that definitely happened.
So Dori, so we're close to where you guys met here. So catch us up in your story to right before you guys met.
My ex, Randy, who's the father of my second son, Ryan, and I divorced. And he had addiction issues to various things and things that were deal breakers. So I was like, I'm done. I'm an independent woman. I can do this by myself, blah, 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 blah. The biggest thing was the infidelity.
Right.
And I forgave once, I forgave twice, but the third time I said, it's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And so I was in this state of limbo. I had 2 kids, no support from either father, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I live in Waco, Texas. I can't have, there's not too many options in Waco.
Right.
There weren't. It's grown up a lot since then.
Waco's changed a little bit.
It has. It has. I might actually live there now, but I ran into a situation of not being able to support myself.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, what do we do? I got kids and
Mouths to feed.
yeah. And, I wasn't going to church. I was done with church. I was done with church.
Right.
I was done with religion. But oddly enough, I had this empty, like this literal hole that I tried to fill with sex. That was my big drug. Drinking. I didn't drink until I got divorced. It wasn't something I did. When I got divorced the second time, I went off the deep end. And, everything, just you name it. Yeah. I started smoking weed, which I'd never smoked weed before in my life. I was self-destructing.
Yeah.
Is what I was doing.
Self-medicating, but
absolutely.
Actually self-destructing.
Yeah, absolutely. I just was not in a good place.
Right.
And I was like, I got to feed my kids, I had flashbacks to my ex of us, getting kicked out of the house and all this for not paying bills. And I'm like, what can I do? So sometimes we do things that, we don't want to do. I had met a guy online because in Waco, that was about your only option back then was online.
Yeah.
Met this guy online. I did not want to get married, was not looking to get married. I was just looking to have relations with people.
Yeah. Fill the hole, if you will.
Yes, self-medicate.
Right.
Truly. This person told me, asked me, I should say, had I ever considered escorting? And I went, what? No, never, And he's like, well, you should. And so little bells go off, ding, 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 ding. I'm thinking bad, because you think of what you see on TV.
Right.
And so he said, I have a group that I'm a part of men, very influential men, pastors, doctors, lawyers, congressmen. And these people are safe. And so I could set you up. You could meet one of them and then see how it goes. And if they like you, they'll keep you in this group. You don't pay them or anything. It's not like a pimp type of situation.
Right.
You're what they call an independent contractor. And you keep all of your money, blah, blah, blah. But we're offering you a safe space to do this in. So I did it. I was like, sign me up. And everything went out the window at that point. As far as my morals, things I said I'd never do. You know, when you got kids to feed, you'll do what you got to do sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do this. And
No other options really in your mind.
I didn't think I had any options. You know, so that was kind of where we were in the year 2000.
And then all of a sudden, you guys meet. Tell us about that.
Well, wasn't separated from my third wife yet, but things were spiraling down pretty quick. And it was 2002. The internet, you know, was this cesspool of stuff, as it can
still
be.
is.
Still is, yeah. I started looking at ways to be able to meet other people. Again, through no fault of, and one of the things I want to make very clear, my first three wives had very little fault in what happened in our relationships. It was mostly me. And so I started looking for how could I meet other women? And I came across this website and started looking at the women that were on the website, and lo and behold, I saw Dori. That wasn't her name online. We don't need to talk about that. But I saw her picture, and so I don't even remember how I made the appointment. Did I call you?
You emailed me.
Emailed, yeah. It's funny because when people previously have asked us how we met, we always answer, we met on the internet.
Which is never questioned at this point.
Never questioned.
Not anymore.
Yeah, Match.com or whatever, right?
Sure.
I emailed her, set up an appointment, and went over to see her. So that's how we initially met.
So you guys met kind of through this, you know, immoral way.
Exactly.
But then a relationship develops.
Yeah, after probably the second time, so I really was attracted to her. She was very friendly, very outgoing. So I went back and saw her again. But after about the second or third time, there was some feelings starting to come up. And so I had moved out of my house. And in fact, went and stayed in an apartment. And so, it just, all of a sudden these feelings started coming up, and it was like, whoa, this is, and now that I think about it, the initial way that we met, I was getting validation. I was getting validated in that I'm this great guy. And so our relationship started, and it, after, like I said, maybe 2 or 3 appointments, there wasn't any financial commitment anymore.
Yeah.
It was a relationship. So, one day, I asked her, I said, do you want to quit doing this? And she was like, what do you mean? And I said, I don't want you doing this anymore. And so I helped her pay some bills, and we started at that time a relationship. And so we were, I guess, boyfriend and girlfriend, for lack of a better term. Yeah. Now, in our early time together, we like to say our relationship was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Mm-hmm. Our drug of choice was alcohol. I was drinking at the time. I haven't. I've been sober from alcohol for 20 years now. Mm-hmm. And it was constantly a party. Yeah. I thought I was living every man's dream. And it was rather interesting. And then in New Year's Eve of 2003, I went to Dori's boys, Logan and Ryan, and I asked them, hey, I want to propose to your mom. What do you think about this? And they were like, yeah. I guess they saw me as kind of somebody who was stable in their life. Mm-hmm. And so I proposed to her on New Year's Eve of 2003, and we were married on New Year's Eve of 2004.
Wow. I didn't realize that was both your engagement date and your marriage date.
Yep. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yep. So, yeah. And this coming New Year's Eve, it'll be 20 years that we've been married.
How cool.
It was not marital bliss up for all 20 years.
All right. So you guys then get married in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Are you living in Waco or moved down to Austin by that time?
Yeah, we built a house out in Steiner.
Okay. So this
we were
is
out there.
Okay. So now y'all are living in Austin, the ritzy part of Austin. Still living the quote unquote dream.
Yeah.
Somebody's dream.
Somebody's dream. Take me through those early years in marriage.
It was rough. The boys made it kind of rough. They rebelled. You're not my dad.
Yeah.
I like I like kind of rules, and they didn't necessarily like rules. There were
blended family too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anybody that's got a blended family knows it's hard.
So now, were there 4 boys under the roof at that time?
No. He didn't have
my boys
much of a relationship
just
at the time with his kids.
It was just your 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
My boys were living in Florida.
Okay.
My sons were living in Florida with their mom. And I guess 20 years ago, Ryan, we both have Ryans. My Ryan was an adult, so he was going to college, and my younger son, Eric, was still in high school. And yeah, I didn't have much of a relationship with my boys because there were some things that happened between us, and what I found out later was their mom shared a lot of negative information about me to them, stuff that she shouldn't be telling children.
Sure.
Including how we met.
And so, so it was rough. I got to see him not nearly as much as I wanted to.
Sure.
But, it was rough. There were times when, in the first couple of years, every statistic says our marriage shouldn't last.
Yeah. 4th marriage, third marriage.
Yeah.
And it's actually funny. One of our counselors and a good friend of ours, Jimmy Myers, who runs the Timothy Center, wrote a book. And one of his chapters in his book was about Dori and I. And, statistically speaking, there was no chance for us to stay together. Luckily, the Lord doesn't worry about statistics.
Yeah.
We struggled a little bit. We knew, a lot. One day, I think it was one of our appointments with Jimmy. We asked, "Hey, I think we want to go to church somewhere. Can you make a recommendation?" Jimmy knew a lot of pastors. And he said, "Man, you guys need to go to Austin Christian Fellowship. That Will Davis guy, man, it is the most non-churchy church place you ever wanted to go." And
so pause real quick.
Yeah.
I'm curious. How did you guys are living in the world. Church is not a deal. All of a sudden, you end up at a Christian counselor, and now you're thinking about church.
Dori had talked to Jimmy previously because he specializes in troubled teens.
Okay.
And he was actually counseling her Ryan.
Okay.
So that's how we knew him. And then when we decided to go in because we knew we needed help.
So the relationship at this point had deteriorated enough
absolutely.
that you guys knew that you got to get in somewhere and get some help. Or
Absolutely.
Well, we had
this
done
thing is done.
premarital counseling with him.
Oh, you had.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually did.
Because she knew him from previous.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
We
man,
did
I didn't put all that
premarital
together.
counseling, and we literally have been in counseling our entire marriage. I'm not kidding.
Until the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm still sort of kind of in counseling. I've got her on speed dial.
Individually, we
Yeah.
do some just for
Yeah.
checkups, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we knew, and Jimmy, you're very correct. Jimmy is a Christian counselor, and I guess he was the one that recommended, hey, maybe you want to think about going to church.
So that finally struck a chord somewhere with you guys.
Well, what was funny is I had a guy that I worked with at Golfsmith that knew Blake, which he was one of the elders,
Yeah, Blake.
had gone to college with him, grew up with him, and said, hey, you need to go to this church. Because we were talking something about God. And understand, God was not on my radar. I was very anti-God at that point.
20 years ago.
And I'm like, yeah, we'll see. And he and I had gotten in this huge fight, is what had happened, to kind of give you a little quick backstory on it. And he was sleeping upstairs. I was sleeping downstairs. We were done. We were getting divorced. It was like we both knew it.
So like counseling's out the window.
Everything.
But this little bug said, "Oh, you should go to church."
Yeah, this was the Saturday before we went to ACF for the first time on Sunday.
Yeah.
We had decided that we were going to go to ACF and give it a try.
Yeah.
Even though at this point in your minds, this marriage is done.
Well,
It was to me.
yeah.
I truly, I was done.
Yeah.
So
And-
it was funny. We woke up on Sunday morning and I texted her, "Do you still want to go to No, she texted me, "Do you still want to go to church?" And I texted back. We were 30 feet apart,
Yeah.
maybe.
Texting each other in the same
Texting
house.
each other
Yeah.
with a door between
Yeah.
us.
It's healthy.
And yeah, exactly. And I texted back, "I guess so." So we got dressed, and we didn't look at each other. We didn't say one word to each other. We walked into Austin Christian Fellowship and sat in the back left. And I know sometimes my memory isn't as good as it used to be, but I remember this day like it was yesterday. Gary Sinclair was preaching. Love Gary very much. And he was preaching the last in a series they called Give Stress a Rest. I don't remember one word of what he said with that sermon. However, when the sermon was finished, the worship band came back up and they started playing Amazing Grace. And as clear as you and I can hear each other talking, I heard a voice behind me say, "You've been trying to do this all by yourself. Do you want some help?" And I turned around. There was nobody there. And this does it to me every time. I knew that it was the Holy Spirit. And I started weeping. Put my head in my hands. Dori looks at me and she's like, "Oh my God, he's mad. He's going to throw
But I
a
thought,
fit.
he doesn't want to be here.
He doesn't
He's
want
like,
to
done.
be here." And then she leaned over a little more and she saw, it was Niagara Falls. And we looked at each other and we hugged. And we walked up to meet Gary and I told him what had happened. And that started us in our journey back. My journey back.
I wasn't
journey.
sold.
Her journey.
I wasn't sold.
Yeah, she wasn't sold yet. This was November of 2006, I think. February is the men's retreat. So just
so you guys at this point, you kind of muddle through.
Muddle through a little bit. Yep.
We're going to go to church. This thing seems to help us a little bit.
Yeah, I think we still stayed in separate parts of the house for a
little
bit.
While, yeah.
Just,
I don't even remember. She remembers, and she can tell you. I don't remember what the fight was about.
I don't remember what the fight was
Wow,
about.
first time.
But
It was a doozy.
I remember I was not sold.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you're not getting me that easy.
Yeah. Not gonna go to church and cry and think everything's gonna be
Yeah.
okay.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
Right.
Even though I loved it, but I'm like, yeah, I've loved church before and gotten burned. So show me something more than this, Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was taunting him. That's what I was doing. I'm not kidding.
No, I believe you.
So I go to the men's retreat in February. I meet Blake Erskine and Mark Blackburn, two
Two great guys.
great guys. I call them my spiritual mentors. They did a little session for the retreat about small groups. I was sitting in the front row for every session. I was so hungry for something. I didn't know what it was.
Did you think you had the hole as well? The hole in
Big
your
time.
heart?
Big time.
Maybe not those words you would have used at the time.
I
but-
knew I was missing something.
Yeah.
And so every session I was sitting in the front row, and Blake and Mark were presenting on small groups, and they talked about they have a men's small group. And as soon as they were done, I ran over to them and I was like, guys, can I join your small group? And they were like, of course you can. And I came home from that men's retreat on fire. I had gotten a gas tank full of Jesus. And I came home and I started beating Dori over the head with the Bible.
How did that work?
Not physically, but it didn't work well. She still was skeptical, let's say. Although she did agree, I wanted to get baptized. And I wanted her to do it with me. And she agreed to do it. She was still not sold. So we got baptized in somebody's pool overlooking River Place Country Club by Will. And
Jimmy actually baptized me.
oh, that's right. Jimmy
Jimmy
came.
Myers.
That's right.
That's
Jimmy
cool.
came to the baptism.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
right. Yeah. And anyway, yeah, it was. I just knew at that moment I had found something. I thought I had found acceptance. The guys, the men at ACF were great. They tried to help me as much as they could. And to this day, I still remember one of the very first small groups that I went to, Markham and Blake's small group, and we were talking about forgiveness. And of course, I carried a serious wound and actually a lot of hate for my father in my heart. And I remember I said, I can forgive anybody, but there is a special place in hell for people who who hurt children. I will never, I said those words, I will never forgive my father. Blake told me 12 years later, he said, I remember when you said that, and Blake said, I said to myself, yes, you will. And it took a lot of years,
Yeah.
but eventually I did. But yeah, we were still struggling, even though I was on fire for Jesus. I was really good at compartmentalizing. That word, compartmentalizing. Men in general are really good at compartmentalizing. We're able to take, maybe in times of stress, we can take that stress and set it aside to try to put on a good face, or in my case, I would take Jesus and say, hey, would you go over here and don't look at me for a while? At the time, I didn't know it, but I had a very serious addiction to pornography. I traveled a lot for work. In a lot of cases, it was 3 out of 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I was gone. I would go out on Monday. I would come back on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And in addiction, we always use the word HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Those are the 4 of the probably main triggers for any addiction. Well, in a lot of cases, it was sometimes I was hungry, angry, not so angry, lonely, definitely. And when you're alone in a hotel room, what are you going to do, right? And I'd say, Jesus, please. I wouldn't say it, but I'd kind of later on think about it. Gosh, I hope Jesus wasn't looking at me. And I said the words, I will never do that again. I've probably said that phrase 10,000 times. And what I didn't realize was I was taking away the intimate connection that I could have with my wife. I was taking that away. And Dori knew it. This woman is absolutely one of the most discerning individuals I've ever met. If she ever meets you, anybody watching this, she touches you, she gets vibes, as she likes to call it. And her vibes are never wrong. And she knew something was wrong. She had a pretty good idea. Fast forward, I don't know the first time it ever happened. And just to preface this, I have gone through a 12-step program for my pornography addiction. I've been free from pornography for almost 4 years now.
It's coming up pretty quick, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Next month. I thank God. I thank God every day because one of the things that I did was I stopped compartmentalizing the Lord, and I include him in every part of my life now, all parts of my life. But during that time, as all addictions go, once you get it, you want more, and you want more, and you want more. And eventually, pornography is not enough. And so
let's catch up on timeline here. So
2004, we were married.
2004, we were married. 2006,
I got saved.
That's when you started your journey at ACF.
Journey. Yeah.
So this, continues a decade, kind of this up and down.
Oh, we're still in parts of that. We're still living a crazy life and not living a biblical life or a biblical marriage.
You're going out on the weekends, places you shouldn't be, with people you shouldn't be.
And
definitely.
Absolutely.
Right.
So for me, I'm knowing we're doing this, and I'm still struggling with the whole God thing because he's full in. I'm not full in.
And you see the dysfunction in his life where we're Jesus on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And at Bible study and around church people,
Exactly.
but then there's a different Bob that comes out
Yes.
when he's traveling or when
when
y'all go party
Right.
or
Yes.
whatever the case may be.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm struggling in my brain, but I'm not communicating with him.
So at what point did it click for you that, like, Jesus died for my sins, and I believe this, and I want to follow him?
2010.
2010.
Yeah, it took till then.
2010, and for years, and I mean this in the very literal sense, I remember taunting God and sitting there and going, if you're so real, show me. You're not real. You know, why have I gone through all of this stuff in my life? Some hardcore stuff, you know? And I'm like, I don't get it. You're not real. You can't be real, or I wouldn't be going through this. Mm-hmm. You don't love me, you know? You say you're a loving God. You're not a loving God. And literally, I would scream at him and cuss at him. I mean, crazy stuff. Now, if I look back on it now, I'm like, I'm surprised he didn't strike me dead with some of the stuff I said.
Didn't you say the statement, you need to do something to make me trust you?
No, I said, I need,
Oh, yeah.
and I yelled it. I'm like, if you're so real, I need you to do something big and to make an impact on me. And that's exactly what I said. 2 weeks later,
Exactly what he did.
he made his impact.
So tell that story.
So we never had a honeymoon. We got married New Year's Eve, probably January 3rd. I was back to work.
Yeah.
Dori was working at Golfsmith at the time, which was great for me because I got discounts. So we decided 2010 we were going to take a honeymoon. We were going to go somewhere. So we did a trip down to Mexico to an all-inclusive. Great time. 4 days we were down there, right? I think 4 days or 5 days.
Like that.
Yeah. Beautiful resort. The food was great. Had a great time. And because this was kind of the first time we were doing something like this, I decided we're going to upgrade. So we sit in first class. So we fly back from Cancun to Houston. The door opens up. We're in 1A and 1B. So
you got to say the line that you probably don't remember. We're sitting there. I'm having a glass of champagne, and he looks at me and he goes, "Honey, did you have a good time?" And I went, "I had a great time."
Yeah. Yeah. It was, and actually really was in the first 7.5, 8 years that we knew each other, one of the really first times we felt kind of connected. Mm-hmm. And yeah, she had a great time. 1A and 1B, we stand up, we walk out, and there's Border Patrol agents standing outside on the jetway, and they said, "Hey, can we see your passports?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." So we show them our passports, and they say, "Okay, will you follow us?" And we're like, "Yeah, okay."
This is an upgraded experience
Do you
here.
remember what I said? So they're taking us because, in case y'all don't know, Houston Hobby Airport has
it was
Bush.
International.
Bush
Yeah.
has like a bunch of levels below the main ground floor, but it's only for people that shouldn't be there.
Well, they escorted us through customs, which was like, "Hey, this is great."
And what I
First class
said,
service here.
Yeah.
I looked at him and I went, "Look at us.
Yeah.
We don't even have to go through customs."
Right.
I said, "We're getting a front door, like little escort."
So we go into this big area, and they said, "Mr. DuCharme, can you have a seat? We're going to take your wife back to this room, and we're just going to talk to her." Okay. And we had a connection about an hour 45 out, so I wasn't really too concerned at that time. But 20, 30 minutes later, I was getting concerned. I said, "Hey, what's going on with my wife?" And the agent, one of the agents that was out there, he said, "Oh, they'll come and talk to you in a minute." I guess I don't remember exactly how long it took, but agent comes out and he says, "Mr. DuCharme, I'm just going to have to let you know your wife is not going home with you today." And I looked at him and I was like, "What is going on?" He goes, "Well, she's being arrested for a 10-year-old warrant out of Escambia County, Florida, the Pensacola area." And I was totally confused. I was like, "What is going on?" "That's all we can tell you right now, Mr. DuCharme. You need to exit to the airport." I mean, they literally escorted me out to...
So you didn't get to see her. You didn't get to talk to
Well,
her.
at that moment,
Yeah,
I got to see her as they were walking her out in handcuffs. And she was extremely emotional. And she was like, I don't know what this is all, and she was like, just really, really. So my first phone call was to Blake. Mm-hmm. Blake's an attorney.
Right.
I told him what was going on, and I wanted to try to find an attorney. What's funny was this was a Saturday, I think, because Monday I had jury duty that I had to report to. And if you don't report for jury duty, what happens?
Yeah,
you get a warrant for arrest. So
How ironic.
So I find out that they take her to a holding area, holding jail down in South Houston, and eventually then she was transferred to Harris County. I don't know what the inside of Harris County is like. I know what the outside of it's like, and it was absolutely horrendous. So I was a mess. In fact, as I was driving to South Houston to try to figure out what's going on, I'm on my cell phone, and I drove through a school zone on the cell phone, and I got pulled over by a cop jumped out in the road and directed me over. He gave me a ticket. I told him what was going on. He didn't want to hear it. So the next day, I actually, in the area that she was staying, there was a court, and I went before the judge and told the judge exactly what happened the day before, and the judge was like, dismissed. This is crazy. I still don't know what's going on. I mean,
So this is like Tuesday of the next week.
Yeah, well,
or Wednesday.
So this is Sunday.
Oh, okay. So you got on the plane, jumped back, or got back to
No, I
Austin?
stayed in I
Okay.
stayed in Houston for a day, but I eventually got back to Austin. I went to jury duty, got excused,
Gotcha.
immediately drove back to Houston, and by this time Dori was in Harris County. Well, come to find out that Escambia County had 10 days to pick her up. If they did not pick her up in 10 days, they had to let her go. And so I went to visit her in Harris County.
You came to visit me in the city jail too.
Yeah. And I was an absolute wreck. And she was calm.
That was the city jail.
She was totally calm.
What had happened?
They took me. They told me what it was for.
Mm-hmm.
So I had done something when I was young. I got put on probation, had some fees. I did all of that. I thought I left. My ex-husband took care of all the money. I wasn't allowed to have anything to do with the money. Well, what I found out through this was he didn't pay any of the fines. And so but I had been out of the country probably 25 times.
And never.
This is the first time they ever
time.
picked it up.
Yep.
First time.
Yep.
So they told me what it was, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. Just get in touch with my probation officer.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't there anymore. Well, reach out to Randy. I even had him, you reached out to him, didn't you?
I did.
And he wouldn't help.
No.
Nothing. So what happened for me, remember, I'm the one taunting God.
Yep.
I get to the city jail, Houston City Jail, and the very first thing that happened is they take you in for an intake evaluation, medical stuff. What drugs are you on? Medications,
Right.
things like that. And, let me back up. They put me in a cell with 100 women, one big cell, with 2 potties in the middle of the cell. Like, I'm a little freaked out because I came back from Cancun wearing a pair of little shorts,
Shorts, yeah.
and a tank top and flip-flops. And
That's it.
literally that was all I had on. And I was super sunburned because I had gotten bad sunburn the day before. So I remember walking in this huge open cell, and I'm like immediately looking, where can I go, just to get away from people. I went to this bed in the very back right, and I sat on the bottom bunk, and I just sat there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, now I was under a lot of stress, so this is what I thought it was at first. I'm sitting there, and when I say this place was wild, these women are crazy, okay? And you lock them up in a cage, they get crazier. And I had seen a lot of stuff in my day, But these people were out of control. And there's yelling. You can't even hear yourself think, it's so loud in there. And people are coming up to me because they want to know who the new girl is.
Right.
You know? And I'm just like, just leave me alone. You know, I just want so I put on this tough exterior, like, you don't want to mess with me. Sat back there, and all of a sudden, I'm seeing everybody talking. You can hear them, see their mouths moving. All of a sudden, I can't hear them. Like, I can't hear them, and their mouths are still moving. And so I know something's going on. And then all of a sudden, the only way I can explain it ever to anyone is like if you have a bottle of oil and it's warm, and just picture taking a big bottle and just pouring it over your head. And so it literally started at the top of my head, and it just all over my body, and I could feel it just covering my body. I seriously thought this was it. I was having a mental break. I was going to snap, and this is how I was going to go out. But then I hear something, and I hear, it's going to be okay. That's all I heard. And I'm like, oh boy. I'm like,
Either I'm really crazy now or.
well, and I was on medication, my crazy pills is what I call them, still am. And I'm like, man, something's wrong here. But then after I heard that, I got this feeling I'd never felt, ever felt. Like for lack of a better term, like a hug that kind of, like a real hug, like a hug that somebody hugs you and like your grandma would hug you, almost. Like a hug that it's going to be okay. You don't have any more fear. It was so frigging bizarre because I was like, oh my gosh, I know what this is. This is filling that hole. And I was like, and I literally sat there and I'm like, all right, let's do this.
Wow.
And so when I got to
So this had happened. You didn't know about it.
No.
So you come to visit.
when I come to visit her at the city jail before the county, she walks up. She's in this orange jumpsuit. I wish I had a camera. I'd love to take that picture.
Gator orange.
Yeah. And
Got to look at the bright side in there.
I'm a mess. And she's like super calm. And she walks up and she's like, she calls me Robert. Robert, it's going to be okay. That's all she said. It's going to be okay. I know why this is happening. Don't worry. Take care of the things you need to take care of. It's going to be okay. And I was really confused because I thought she should be more of a mess than I was because I'm free. And so I go back home, have work and things like that. And at midnight on the 10th day, I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I tried to get some sleep. I got woken up and I felt this absolute need to go check. There's a database you could go check on the prisoners, and her name was gone out of it. And I went, oh no. And about 7 or 8 in the morning, I get a phone call. Mr. DuCharme? Yes. This is so-and-so from prisoner transport. I just wanted to let you know I'm not supposed to be doing this, but we have your wife and we're taking her to Florida. I will make sure she gets there okay. They're not supposed to call family, relatives, let them know what's going on. So Dori got put in a van and stopped how many times along the way?
Five, six
times.
times. It was...
To pick up and drop off people.
Well, and that's another God story. That right there alone. I mean, like there were a million of them from And a lot of this stuff he doesn't even, I probably never even told him. But some of what started happening, like when they transported me to Harris County, that's when we did the intake, the physical evaluation, everything. So they take you back, a doctor comes, what kind of meds are you on, health issues, blah, 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 blah. So I'm talking to this guy. And I mean, I can see him to this day. I can visually see him. Super nice. Comes in, pulls a little curtain, is asking me my meds and this, that, and the other. And I said, I've got to get on my meds. I've been off my meds, and I can't be off these because I'll go crazy. And weirdest thing, he comes and he puts his hand on my shoulder. And all he said is, it's going to be okay.
Those same words again.
And I'm like, you don't understand. And it didn't hit me then that it was the same thing.
Right.
I said, you don't understand. I've been on these meds for years. They're, crazy pills. And he just, again, it's going to be okay. Blah, 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 blah. So he walks out. And I'm like, what the heck? Where's my meds? So I go and I grab the nurse and I'm like, hey, Dr. So-and-so did not give me my meds. I've got to have my meds. And she looks at me like she's confused. And I'm like, what are we going to do? I need my meds.
Yeah.
Even though I felt fine, oddly enough, I felt fine being off of them. And she goes, honey, we don't have a Dr. So-and-so here. And I went, well, yeah, you do. I just talked to him for 30 minutes. And she goes, we don't have any male doctors in here. These are all female doctors.
Wow.
And I went, well, no, you're wrong. And I need my meds. So I'm still trying to process this.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm not on my meds. I'm going crazy. And that wasn't it at all. And then they put me in a holding cell, like you see on TV.
Right.
So I'm in with this girl, and I'm feeling the God vibe. I know why I'm there. I'm very clear on why I'm there, because this girl that I was in there with was suicidal, and the correction officers, they don't care. They don't in Harris County, unfortunately. And she tried to hang herself.
Right there while you're in the cell with her.
In the cell with me. So I had to literally pick her up and hold her like this. And at the same time, I'm trying to undo the sheet where she had tried to hang herself. And all the girls in the pods are just going bananas. And the CO finally comes in and they take her, to the infirmary.
Right.
But that was one thing. The other, there was a girl in the pod next to me, and I saw she had a Bible on her bed. And I said, is that a Bible? She goes, yeah. And I said, can I read your Bible? And she's like, yeah. And so I started reading the Bible with her. We started having little Bible study get-togethers. I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy, all the stuff that happened. And when they came to get me, literally it was 1 minute after midnight.
So even though they were late, they took you anyway.
They took me, and they took me downstairs. I mean, I had to give all my stuff away real quick, to all the girls, because they don't let you take anything except your clothes that you came in with. They handcuffed me and shackled me and walked me down, put me in this cargo van that had a seat this way, but then seats this way. All the seats in the back were all men. All not nice men. And so I get in, they put me in the one here, but there's a window so the men can see me, and they're acting like animals.
Yeah.
And I remember we drove for a little ways, and then we pulled off the side of the road where there was nothing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to die right here? And the two guys that were driving walked around to the back, opened up the back, and told the guys, if you don't shut up, you're going to end up on the side of the road. And they never said another peep. But they took us, because what they were doing is dropping prisoners off and picking prisoners up.
Got their triangle of...
So we go East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and we have to stay overnight in these different jails. And there's some bad jails out there. I mean, bad jails. So we get to Pensacola. They put me in there. And Robert shows up. He's gotten me an attorney. That was a joke. The first attorney was a joke. Got me a second attorney. And cut and dry was, we can't find any evidence you did any of this. So you're looking at a year in state prison.
Yep.
And
Wow.
So another God thing. She's very correct. The first guy I found, I paid him $1,500. He appeared with her at her initial hearing and didn't say a word. Didn't say anything.
yeah.
And he came out and I was screaming at him. I was like, dude, what are you doing? That's my wife. Do something. Do your lawyer stuff. He's like, you have to understand, Mr. So I fired him immediately. What's your maiden name?
Morris.
I found a guy named James Morris.
No coinky dink.
No relationship. But he ended up in the end. So 93 total days, I think it was.
Yeah.
93 total days. She was actually incarcerated from the time that we got back to there.
The other thing was, even that attorney said, I can't find anything. Or even if I was Johnny Cochran, I couldn't get her out of this. That's what he said. I remember that.
Yeah.
He's like, dude, I can't get her out of this. She's going to spend a year in state prison, which was fine with me.
Yep.
It was weird because when I got to Pensacola, that's when God really started doing crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was God at this point. I'm like, come on, let's do it. Because I know you're real now. And I don't pray with people out loud. You know this, Russell. Yeah. I'm petrified to pray with anybody out loud. I'll pray all day for you in my little closet, but I can't do it out loud. And this girl that was bunking with me was looking at 20 years for a drug charge. And she goes, will you pray with me? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Here you are. You've just started believing.
I know. And I grabbed her hands and it just came out. And I just started praying with her. And she got 10 years.
Wow.
Instead of 20. So she tells another girl, hey, this girl prayed for me.
And it worked.
And
she'll get you out of jail time.
And she said, and happens when she prays. So I've got all, and I journaled it. I still have every one of my journals. Every time I would pray for something and then the result. And I'm not kidding. If it was 20 times, 30, I'd have to go back and look at my journal. But the one thing that made a really big impact on me, so there was a girl that was looking at the death sentence. They were going to execute her because she had killed 2 women, brutally killed them, and then burned their house down. And she was a repeat offender. Well, they had her in her own little area. And people knew not to go near her because she was dangerous.
Yeah.
And she was so intimidating. I mean, it's like, so we're out in the yard one day and I'm sitting there, just reading. I had a little devotional and everything, and I'm reading. She comes and plops down next to me. And all of the girls in the yard were like, everybody just stopped. And she looks over at me and she goes, hey, so I hear you pray for people and stuff happens. And that's not what she said. And I went, well, I do like to pray for people. And she goes, listen, I'm looking at the death penalty. They want to put me to death. She goes, and I need you to pray that that doesn't happen. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell her no.
Yeah.
And so I just grabbed her hands and I prayed, God, whatever your will is. And not just give her 20 years because she needed more than 20.
Yeah.
And she came back the next day and told me that she got life, that they decided to take the death penalty off the table. And she came up and hugged me.
Wow.
And I'm like, freaking out. But stuff like that happened the entire time I was there. A girl that was one of my bunkies towards the end, her family disowned her, wanted nothing to do with her because she was a repeat offender, trouble all the time. And she goes, I just want you to pray that they would come to my hearing and maybe put some money on my books so I can have some commissary. So we prayed that, and her family showed up.
Man.
And they put $20 on her books so she could buy some food. So I started going to Bible studies in there. There were 2 ladies' Bible studies that I did. And I remember getting upset because one day the lady couldn't come. So we didn't get to have a Bible study, and I was really upset about it. I'm like, don't they understand that we're in jail, they're free, and all this? I got mad at him because I had asked him to send me some scripture stuff.
Yeah.
And he was busy and didn't have a chance to do it. So I was ticked because usually I would call him, and unless the girls were misbehaving, and then we got our privileges taken away.
Yep.
But one night I didn't call him, and I should have called him because I called him the next day. I actually went into this Bible study with this Pentecostal lady. And she always kind of gave me the willies because she liked to talk in tongues. I'm like, that's your thing, go for it. But she came up to me that day. And all the girls were like, Dori doesn't belong in here, so let's pray for her. I'm like, I do belong in here. They thought because I wasn't a hardened criminal or anything.
Right.
So this lady comes up behind me, just like this doctor did. She put her hands on my shoulders. And she goes, Dori, it's going to be okay. She goes, you're going home today. And I looked at her, I kind of laughed, and I said, I'm not going home today. I'm looking at a year in state prison, and I'm okay with that because that's where God wants me. And she goes, no, you're going home today. And I remember getting that same feeling of the oil thing, standing there. And all these girls had their hands on me. And being raised Jehovah's Witness,
This is weird.
Kind of freaked me out a little bit. It still does. I mean, but I was like, okay, that's cool, but had no idea what was about to happen. And I walked out of there, and literally the phones were like right here on the wall. And I said, well, I better call him because if the girls misbehave again, I may not get a chance. And I didn't get to talk to him the night before. So I call him, and he's like, got some good news. And I said, oh, okay. Dr. Naglieri had her baby. And blah, 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 because her baby was going to be born with some health issues.
And just for clarification, this was your boss at the time?
No,
not
Okay.
yet.
not at the time.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, so you
She
weren't
was
working
just
for her yet.
family doctor and friend.
Okay.
And he starts crying. And I'm like, what's wrong? And now this is July 3rd.
July 3rd.
And he goes, you want to hear some more good news? And I'm like, yes. I'm in jail. He goes, you're going home today. And I was like, what? And he goes, you're going home. And he's sobbing and sobbing. And I remember just kind of blacking out for a minute.
She didn't realize that the day before I had gotten a phone call from her attorney, and he goes, we just pay a fine and she's getting out. And I remember I fell on the floor.
That's what I did. I slid down the wall when he told me that. And all the girls were around me, and they're all, oh my God, she's going home. She's going home.
I couldn't pack a bag fast enough and drive. I'm sure I broke a few speed limits driving to Pensacola. And July 3rd is Independence Day now for Dori. Yeah, she got we paid the fine, which is another God story. I didn't have the money. I went to Blake to ask him for a loan, and I told him. He said, well, I was in his office at work, and he said, "Let's get on our knees and pray." And so we did, and he wrote me a check, and 2 months later, I think I got a bonus from work, and I wrote him a check, and I was so happy that I could pay him back. He tore the check up. He said, "Your debt's already been paid."
Wow.
And so I got her.
Sprung me. First thing I said when I got out, he had never seen me without my hair colored.
She wanted to get her hair colored.
I was gray, like for real gray. And I said, "Take me by Walgreens. I got to get some hair color." So that's the first thing I did when I got out of jail. But we got to meet with the lady, one of the partners of the little company that she worked for when all this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
she was always a strong Christian.
Yeah. And we
super strong.
Had dinner with her.
Yeah.
And she said, "I never wanted this to happen, Dori. I just want to let you know my other partner was the one that pushed this."
And made up lies and...
Yeah. So it was the transformation for her in the ability to make her trust God. She knew that's exactly why God put her there.
Yep.
And I didn't understand it. I still, probably to that day, I didn't understand it.
So you come back home.
Yep. 2010.
2010. And now you're on fire.
I wasn't on fire like him.
But at this point, you're like, I know that I know.
I know God's real.
Yeah.
And I know right from wrong. I know how I should be living.
But we still didn't live that way.
Still didn't live it.
So you come home, you have this really dramatic experience where the Lord really reveals himself to you.
Yeah.
And, I mean, does things in your life at the same time.
Yep.
And
it wears off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
We got back in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my relationship with God was so new that I didn't understand the magnitude of a true relationship. I wasn't deep enough in it. I mean, I look back now and I'm like, because of my relationship with him now and how different it is. But I look back then and I didn't know what I didn't know, I guess. Yep. I knew, but the world still kind of had enough of a hold on me. I hadn't worked through things in my past was the biggest thing. Yeah. I think all the shame that I have carried about the escorting and doing that, and then wondering how could God love me.
Right.
You know, it's and thinking now, okay, all this stuff I'm going through in my marriage is just payback, right?
Yeah. So let me just kind of clarify this.
Yeah.
You know, so at this point you're both saved, like you both know the Lord. You're walking with him to some degree, but at the same time, like your identity in Christ has not been fully formed.
No.
And so
that's correct.
Saved by the blood, believe in him, going to church, we're active. But in so many ways, I mean, your identity hasn't been fully changed. You're still carrying, we've talked about generational curses. You're still carrying those from your family, repeating the same patterns of behavior that you've seen over and over again throughout the years.
Yes. And it's like, okay, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but how do I not do this? Yeah. Where's the switch?
Yeah.
And so this continues for several years.
Several years.
So fast forward, we meet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2016, 17? 17 maybe?
Yeah.
16, 17. Yeah. We start a campus here in Hutto.
Yep.
You guys come to the very first meeting. And I remember meeting you for the very first time. You were so excited on your email when we emailed back and forth. And you're like, yep, we're going to be there. Yep. And then really fast after that, you're like, yep, we're in. We're gonna help you do this thing, start this satellite campus with the ACF. And I don't think you were fully on board at that point, were you?
I wasn't, because I had, again, stepped away from church. I was not happy with some of the things, church hurt that I encountered.
Just seeing a pattern
yes.
in people.
And so I kind of stepped back. I was like, we had moved back from San Antonio because I took a job down there.
Right.
And he wanted to go back, but I didn't want to go back.
And we were living in Pflugerville.
Yeah.
And so the drive, we would do Saturday nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saturday nights were, a little easier than trying to drive over there on Sunday mornings.
I was not engaged at all because our marriage was
very rocky still.
Yeah,
just
I remember.
Because, I knew stuff was going on, but there was no proof, I guess.
Yeah.
And, we didn't communicate at all.
Yeah.
Because he was, I've since learned, because of the addiction, they don't communicate with their spouse. The more secrets they can keep, the better. So if he communicated with me, he might spill something. But I didn't know that then. I just thought he didn't like me. Yeah. And he didn't like me.
No, I didn't for
he
some
told
time.
me, he did not like me. But then oddly enough, I prayed about that when we found Hutto, because I remember praying when we lived in Pflugerville. I'm like, Lord, I need to get back into church, any church. So please put something in my path. And then I'm scrolling on Facebook and I see ACF is launching Hutto. That's how I got on board with Hutto, because I was like, oh my gosh, I told him, I said, oh my gosh, it's right down the road.
Yeah.
We looked at it, we saw there was a meeting, and so we came to that first meeting and we were in.
Well, and then even when we launched, you guys were a vital part of that. You guys were there early, setting up. You were running all of our guest services at that time.
Yeah.
Load in, load out.
Yeah.
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 The good old days.
Those good old days.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were carrying signs in and out, setting them up all over the YMCA there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Not living a godly life.
Not
though.
living a godly life.
Yeah, still same pattern
Yeah.
going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt, I was like, there's something here to this small church, this small startup. There's something here. And I didn't realize what it was until a little bit later, I discovered it was like, hey, these people are just like us. We're just regular people. There were a few times, more than a few times probably, that at big ACF, you could actually be invisible, but you could also see, a lot of times you'd see the BMWs and the Mercedes and stuff out in the parking lot, and you get a little intimidated. And just to be honest, I was making good money, but we were spending it faster than we were making it. We accumulated a significant amount of debt. Yeah. And but there was something about that. I'd never been part of a small church before. It's always been big Catholic churches or bigger churches, right? And I felt a connection. I immediately felt a connection.
I did too, honestly. Yeah. I told Robert, I said, I like that.
Yeah.
Because I felt like it was real.
Yeah.
I felt like that if I ever did want to tell my entire story, that people wouldn't judge me.
Yeah.
And I had been judged at other places.
Yeah.
Not even for myself, for, my son unfortunately being an addict.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it clicked. It definitely clicked.
Yep. But we still, I know I still was compartmentalizing. The pornography turned into, there were 3 occasions that I went to Las Vegas for business trips, and I hired escorts. And again, said the words, "I'll never do that again." I was disgusted with myself, basically. But it happened. And we actually, again, not living a godly life, we got into what they called a lifestyle or swinging. And we did some things that you shouldn't do in a marriage. So I'll tell you how I felt. I felt like the things that we were doing were okay. Everything was okay because of how we met. And I was rationalizing it that way.
You're
right?
trying
It was
to justify yourself.
Justification, total justification. And we had previously done some things like that, and Dori kind of cut me off. This is the way I looked at it.
Yeah.
And because she was like, "No, we can't do this." Well, she got back in. She came on board again because it was, at the time, the only way I was paying attention to her, which was sad when I think about it.
So I was going to go along with anything.
Anything, as long as I
Just
paid
if he
attention.
would
If
look
I
at you.
if I felt like it was going to help my marriage,
Yeah.
then I was going to go along with it,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Fast forward a little bit. I had a part-time job working at the HEB Center, working the hockey games and such, and I love doing it. I love helping people. So I'm at a hockey game one night, and I got my phone in my pocket, and my phone buzzes, and I look at it, and it's a text message from Dori in all caps. "You need to come home right now." In all caps. The very first thing that went into my brain was, her son finally killed himself. He OD'd.
Right.
Her son Ryan is a heroin addict.
Right.
And so I ran to my supervisor. I was like, "Hey, I got to go home." And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely, go home." So I drove home, and she's sitting there, and I had left my computer unlocked, and the Lord had told her, "Hey, maybe you should go look at your husband's email." And there was an email in there from an escort that I had seen. And so she asked me about it, and I didn't deny anything. I told her what had happened, and she said, "All right, this is a lot to process right now." And it was shortly thereafter that the term sex addict came into being. And it was Dori that actually said, "Hey, I think you might be a sex addict." And I was like, "Are you crazy? I'm not Tiger Woods, I'm not, I haven't done all this crazy stuff." Well, I did do some crazy stuff. And so there's actually a website, sexaddict.com, run by a counselor out of Colorado. And he has a list of things. And if you answer yes to, a number of them, then yeah, you're a sex addict. Number 1, yes. Number 2, yes. Number 3, yes. Number 4, yes. Number 5, yes. Number 6, yes. I guess I am. And so I discover a group called Sex Addicts Anonymous, just like there's Alcoholics Anonymous, just like there's NA. And now we're in COVID. All of a sudden, this thing called COVID started. And so they have meetings. Everything's virtual.
And all this time, your relationship is still very
No,
toxic.
it's horrible.
Very toxic.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's,
I mean,
in fact,
barely speaking.
Oh,
Yeah.
we weren't speaking.
we weren't.
You were staying in another
Staying
bedroom,
in another
right?
bedroom.
Yeah.
So I started going to meetings virtually, but I wouldn't turn my camera on. You could stay anonymous. You didn't have to say anything. I was doing it to appease her so that, hey, look what I'm doing. I'm going to meetings. I found a counselor, what we call a CSAT, Certified Sex Addiction Therapist. And if anybody's watching this, please don't pay a counselor and lie to them. I did that many times.
Our entire marriage.
I mean, you're paying somebody $125, $150 an hour.
Tell them the truth.
Why are you lying to them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I still was only doing that to appease her.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I found my group that to this day I still attend on Tuesday nights. It was the only group in Austin that was meeting in person. We were meeting outside. And it's in Cedar Park. And an amazing group of men who I just thought for sure I was going to walk in and see a bunch of really weird dudes. I saw a bunch of guys just like me who had done same thing that I did or even worse. And when we talked about what we talked about, there wasn't one iota of judgment. And I was like, oh, wow. So just like any 12-step program, you find a sponsor. Mm-hmm. And I found a sponsor. And the very first thing he told me was, I am your sponsor. I am not your friend. And I'm so glad he said those words to me. I tell the guys that I work with, my sponsees, I tell them the same exact thing. I'm your sponsor. I'm not your friend. We may become friends. And my sponsor and I are very good friends now. I was accountable to him. I lied to him one time. And I felt so bad about it. The next week I told him that I lied to him without him even asking. And one of the things he shared with me was, Bob, this is your program. This isn't my program. Mm-hmm. You don't need to impress me. You need to work this program so you can get better. And I was on step 4. And Dori and I were she was seeing a little bit of progress, just a little.
But very guarded.
Very guarded. Oh, extremely guarded. Yeah, very guarded. In step 4, you identify what we call our character defects.
Yeah.
And there's a worksheet that you kind of work off of, and there's a list of like 70 or 80 character defects. And I went through there and I checked like 35, 40 of them. And you're supposed to narrow it down to the top 10 to work on. And to that point, I had shared nothing with Dori about my work in the program, because the program is for the addict.
Right.
It's not necessarily for the spouse or for the significant other. The after effects are for them. And so it was the first time that I ever asked her, hey, I'm going to give you this thing. Can you go through this and I'm going to ask you these character defects, and you think about me and say yes or no. And so we went through them. She said yes or no. And it was so interesting because there were some she said yes to, some that I said yes to, and the other person didn't. And so we actually talked about it. And it was one of the first times, hard to say this, but it was one of the first times that we ever had a really in-depth conversation about either of us. And it was great. And it was funny because one of the number one character defect for any addict is dishonesty. Mm-hmm. Number one. I don't care what you want to meet the greatest actors in the world, meet an addict because they can put on a good face. And but one of them that I had checked and Dori didn't was anger. And she said, Robert, I don't think I've ever seen you angry because I never really got outwardly angry. And I said, I checked that because I had this simmering, boiling anger inside of me about my father. And I never let that out. But that was something that I carried with me for a very long time. And so that started my journey. Shortly after that, she asked me a question. She said, would you still be doing this if I left you? And I hesitated for a second. And she goes, yep, there's the answer. And I said, wait, just a second. I said, I had to think about that for a second. And I said, yes, if you left me today, I still would go through the entire program because I'm doing this for me. And it was the first time that I really discovered that I needed to do this for myself to then become a better husband, a better father, a better grandfather, a better friend. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a very good friend even. And that, I think, Dori can agree or disagree, really started it was just the start. I mean, this is 4 years ago, right? Yeah. Just started our relationship becoming repaired. And I never knew what intimacy was. I was never taught intimacy.
No. You think intimacy is sex.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The way I was raised.
And the same with me.
Yeah.
I never knew what being intimate and really truly what love was, right? In the world. I understand God is love. And I understand that he loves me unconditionally. I had questions just like Dori had. I had shame. I had guilt that I carried. I carried shame and guilt because of the abuse my father did to me. I thought it was my fault. I did something wrong. In fact, this woman is the first person I ever told that my father abused me. Mm-hmm. And I never told my first 3 wives. And if I would have talked about it sooner, maybe I could have gotten help. But anyway, this 12-step program has been a life changer and a life saver. I've learned to like myself. I didn't like myself for a very long time. I hated myself. You've known us for 8 years now.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of physical changes in me. I've gained a lot of weight. I've lost some weight. I've lost a lot of weight. I gained some weight back and I lost some weight.
Lost some hair too.
Lost some hair. I just decided the heck with it. Let's get rid of it. I like it. It's easier. But during those times, I was trying to find a way to like myself. And what I came to find out was God loves me no matter what. He loves me if I'm 330 pounds, which is what I used to be. He loves me if I'm 230 pounds. He loves me when I'm bad to my wife. He loves me when I'm great to my wife. He much rather would prefer that I would be a good guy. I had to find the way to become that decent human being. Mm-hmm. I'm 65 years old. It took me 60 years to finally figure this out. And in the program, they always they try to make it as agnostic as possible.
Right.
They talk about a higher power. In the meeting, I always share, I said, guys, you know my higher power is my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He died for me, for all of my sins, for your sins, and that's who my higher power is. The beauty about the program is we had a guy that was a confirmed atheist in our group. And he moved a couple of years ago. But before he moved, I bought the book, The Case for Christ.
Yeah.
And I gave it to him. And I said, Simon, please read this for me. I said, there's a God that loves you. I don't know if he's read it, but I planted that seed. And it's because of the program that a confirmed atheist and a on-fire Christian can sit together in a circle and support and love each other. And I truly, now I'm going through this program. Dori is also going through counseling, her individual counseling, to deal with a lot of her stuff.
Yeah, Dori, catch us up on. Yeah. So Bob is going through this, and I remember most of this. Yeah. And you made a lot of progress really fast. But
I tried to do the 12-step program in 12 weeks. It doesn't work that way. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
But at that time, you and I were meeting every week. And we could see the progress. I mean, it took us a while to believe you. Because I remember at one point, way back when, you had lied to me about something. And I can't remember. You were going to be somewhere, and then you went and played golf. And you told me some lie, and I said, Bob, do you have a problem with lying? And you looked me square in the eye and said, nope. And so it took me a long time to really believe that you were going through the program. And then, of course, the lies that you just kind of observed from a distance.
Absolutely.
But I saw it, and it was real, and the Lord was really working on your heart quickly.
Yep.
But Dori, on the other hand.
It's funny because, again, I had been praying in a good way this time. I'm like, I had been asking God for truth. That's what I asked for. I said, Lord, I know something's going on. I just need truth. Whatever that truth is, I need it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, he was at work. I was sitting on the sofa about to go to bed and I was on Instagram, of all things. And I heard, it came in threes. The first time it was, you need to go check Bob's computer. And I'm like, Bob? I don't call him Bob. And he was in cybersecurity. He kept his computer on lockdown at all times. This is how I knew it was God. And I sat there and I went, I don't have his passwords. He keeps his computer on lockdown.
Arguing with him again.
Yep. So I go back to Instagram, and then I hear, you need to go check Robert's computer. And I'm like, I had not been drinking, nothing. And I'm like, blew it off again. Third time, Dora, and very few people know my given name.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody calls me Dora.
Right.
Except Robert and God.
And God.
And Dora, go check Robert's computer. And at this point, I'm pretty near aggravated because I'm like, what is wrong? Do I need to up my meds? I'm not recognizing yet what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But that third time, I'm like, oh, here we go again. So I go in his office, and his computer's up. And it's literally unlocked. He's been at work for hours. So it should have shut down, to where I couldn't get in it.
I usually would set my laptop to not go to sleep, because if I was doing a presentation and I stayed on a slide for I didn't want it to go to sleep. So I had set
You had changed the settings.
I had changed the setting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so literally the email was up and everything. So I printed it off and sent,
mm-hmm.
that and everything. And then we went through all of that. But there were 3 times, because God does stuff with me in threes. It's always in threes. There were 3 times I tried to leave.
Yep.
Literally had my car packed. I was going to move in with my friend Kathy in Lakeway, and I was just over it. Flat tires, car wouldn't start. It was always something. And
I don't think I realized there were 3 times.
3
I remember the
times.
flat tire.
yeah, 2 flat tires.
I tell people that story all the time. You want to believe there's a God?
And so I remember standing in the living room and going, all right, fine, I'm staying. Because he told me over and over, and I wrote this in my journal. I'd always write it in my journal. God told me, if you stay, I'm going to redeem your marriage. And I'm like, well,
Maybe.
I guess I'll stay because I don't want to go through this divorce thing again. And I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to trust you about this because so far you're batting 1,000 with me. So I can't really fight with those odds. So I'm going to trust you. And at first, like he said, he did it for me, and I knew he wasn't, actively in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, when he became truly active, and I prayed this all day, at night, I'm like, Lord, I need you to make a change in my husband, because I used to tell him that someday we are going to be traveling and telling our story, our whole story, because we never have told our whole story. And so I'm like, were you just messing with me, God? I mean, you're going to let it all in like this?
Well, and you were very frustrated through this process of his recovery, if I remember
Yeah,
right.
because he wasn't in recovery. He was still acting out.
Initially, yeah.
And then I decided to get rebaptized and asked you to rebaptize me because I just gotten to a point in my relationship with God. I knew that was real. And I knew I could rely on that. I couldn't rely on anything else in my world at that time.
Right.
My ex-husband had died the same 2 weeks after I found out about him. My ex-husband died, which meant I had to get in touch with my addict son that I hadn't spoken to in years and tell him his father passed. And it was just a bunch of mess. 2019 was terrible.
Yeah. But Dori also realized that she had a lot of work to do on herself.
Oh, yeah, because I looked at the world very skewed because of, the stuff my uncle put me through, the fact that my dad was just uber abusive and I was in a toxic home environment. And
We both had stuff to deal with individually.
Yeah, and
Which we came into this relationship with so much baggage that it was just,
yeah.
if it was up to the world, it would have failed a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Yeah.
But it was like, I don't know, God just, he made it so clear to me. He just did. And even now, I mean, our marriage is not perfect. We're getting to know each other after 22 years.
Finally dating one another.
Well, it's true, though.
It's true.
I mean, we have discovered what intimacy, I mean, like real intimacy is. And we're still working on that because it's hard. It's hard for me to be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's not sex.
I remember it was funny the first time we saw a counselor together after I was in recovery. The counselor asked Dori, "So how does this make you feel?" She's like, "This is really weird." When something good happened,
Yeah.
she's like, "This is really weird, and it's going to take me a while." And so I realized, okay, I get it. I'm changing. This is strange to her. I'm a different person than I used to be. I truly am a new creation. I too was baptized. I was baptized in a volcanic lake in Nicaragua, my absolute favorite place on this planet.
Oddly enough, you did that was that the same time that I got baptized? Because I didn't tell him that I got baptized
remember.
again. And I told Russell, I said, I'm not telling him, because that was something so personal for me
Yeah.
with,
And it
With
wasn't
God.
the same time because
oh, that's right, because yours was November.
yeah, and we were in a good place when I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
in NICA. We weren't in a good place when she got rebaptized.
Yeah, yeah. But I knew I wanted to get rebaptized because I knew what God was doing in me. And I knew, if nothing else, if my world fell apart, I knew I would have God. And I knew God would have me. And I knew I wouldn't have to live the way I'd been living before, because I kept doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And guess what? That hole never got filled, no matter how much sex you have, how many drugs you do.
How much alcohol you drink?
Yeah, it does not fill it. It fills it for like that much.
Yeah.
And then you're empty again.
Yep,
And
Emptier than you were before.
absolutely.
definitely.
It sucks more out of your soul.
But now I tell people all the time, I'm like, God has changed my husband. He has saved our marriage.
Well, and that was your prayer. Like, your prayer was for a godly husband. I remember you being
Yes.
so frustrated over that.
Yes.
Because, like, you want him to change, but he's going through the motions.
Right.
That was early recovery.
Right,
Early
right.
recovery,
But-
absolutely.
But I knew when God finally,
When it clicked.
Yeah.
you could tell in his behavior. I mean, and he was so good about making me feel safe. And he's like, I want to make you feel safe, and I want you to trust me again. And I told him, I said, the trust thing's going to take a long time. But I can honestly say I'm like 99.8%
Yeah.
on the trust meter.
There's a great book. Dori's a voracious reader. I'm not. I'm not a big reader. I don't like to read a lot.
I'm not a voracious reader.
Oh, I mean, you got a lot of books.
I got. There you go. I just look like I'm a.
You collect
I
them.
love self-help books.
I
do.
got a recommendation from a fellow in the program, a book called "Worthy of Her Trust," and it was written. Actually, I think it was recommended by my CSAT because he studied under the counselor that wrote the book, and I read that book in like 3 days, and it was the first time and the only time that I ever read a book and I said, hey, I think you need to read this too. And I think that also, Dori read it, because there were excerpts in there from the guy who wrote it, the counselor in Colorado. He went through the same exact stuff that I went through.
Yeah.
But there were excerpts in there from his wife. And I knew at that moment when I was really actively in recovery, I may never hear the words "I trust you" ever again. I did that to myself. But she said those words. Now, she didn't say the words "I completely trust you." She said, "I trust you." We have, even during COVID, I started traveling again, and that triggered her. That freaked her out. But what we started to do was put together a plan to say, if she calls me or texts me, I got 5 minutes to respond back.
Yeah.
And if I don't do it, she knows something wrong. And it's not like you're dead or something. She knows something's wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And we put together this plan to I said, she's correct. I want her to feel safe with me. And it's taken a while. I think she does. I think she feels safe with me now.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
and it's not because of my work. Yeah, I did a lot of hard work. I did a lot of introspection. I did a lot of counseling. I did a lot of
meetings.
A lot of meetings, and I still, every Tuesday, I go to them, and I will for the rest of my life, because I believe one of my purposes on this earth is to help other men get through the things that I've gone through.
And they can. That's the thing is, I mean, I've talked to some women that are in the situation that I was in, and everybody's situation is different, but it's like they have no hope, and there really is. I mean, there is, if both parties work on it and make sure that God's at the center of it, because if God's not in the center of it, it's never going to work.
Well, I think this is a really important thing to point out. Like, number one, it was his fault. Like, most of this stuff, like, he did to himself. But you still said, I had to work on me at the same time.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I was as broken as he was.
Well, and I think that's good to point out. Like, if there's someone out there who, is going through something like this, like, both parties have to do the work to be able to make the marriage work.
Because I was no saint. I mean, I always felt like I helped perpetuate his addiction because of A, how we started out, B, we kind of continued in that lifestyle all through our marriage.
Right.
And it's like, did we really think that was going to work?
Yeah.
God's not going to honor that.
The word codependency comes up, right? Dori had a lot of codependency.
Very much so.
With that.
And I thought I had to have a man in my life to survive. I've thought that my entire adult life because that's how I was raised. Mm-hmm. You stay with that man no matter what, and you do whatever.
Right. And one of the other things I wanted to point out was both of you independently had to have your identity basically reborn in Christ.
Absolutely.
And so, you had kind of done that, and then it became solidified.
Yeah.
Then you became okay if it was just you and God and he was out of the picture.
Absolutely.
And then in your recovery, you had to do the same thing, knowing that if she left you, which you had every right to do,
Absolutely.
that you would be okay. And you really found out like who you were through that process.
Yeah, because I struggled for a long time knowing who I truly was. I've said this to other people. I always thought I grew up without a father who loved me.
Yeah.
And we're very well aware of a lot of times we get our image of God based on our earthly father. What I discovered is that I always had a father who loved me. My heavenly Father loves me no matter what. And I'm gonna rewind just a real quick second here. One of the biggest things that I did, and I preached a message about this one time about forgiveness. I heard message after message after message about forgiveness. Mm-hmm. Will preached I don't know how many times about forgiveness. And I kept saying to myself, yep, absolutely. I can forgive that guy for cutting me off. I can forgive that person at HEB. I ain't going to forgive him. And one day the Lord convicted me of that. And so I sat down, I wrote a letter. I physically wrote a letter. And Google's a wonderful thing sometimes. I found where my father was living. He was living in Arlington, Texas at the time. And I mailed him the letter. But before I dropped that letter in the mailbox, I prayed on it. I prayed over it. God, please let this find him. And in the letter, I told him many things, but the crux of it was, I can't understand what happened to me as a child. I pray for you that you have found the Lord. I forgive you. I cannot go through this life carrying that debt anymore. And I dropped it in the mailbox, and I felt 1,000 pounds lighter. And that was a part of my journey. And to this day, I still believe that's one of the biggest things that I had to do.
Yeah.
I had to forgive him. I had to forgive myself. We're willing to forgive other people so quickly, and we're the hardest critics on ourselves. And I had to forgive myself for all of the stuff that has happened in my life. Because guess what? Jesus has forgiven me.
Yeah.
And I am I now realize my identity is in Christ. It's not in this world. My identity is not this. I am extremely ecstatic with the fact that we are going to celebrate 20 years of marriage. I know I have become a better husband. I know I have become a better father. My relationship with my sons has been really repaired. I know I'm a much better grandfather than I would have been. And I know I'm a better friend to people around me. And I owe everything in my life to the Lord. The Lord led me to this woman. I found her, but the Lord said, I got something in mind for you guys. And we have free will. Free will sucks sometimes. And we do things that we shouldn't do. But the Lord redeems all of that. I think the biggest change I've made in myself is I'm an honest man who tells the truth even when it's hard to do. I remember the first time Dori asked me a question that I had to honestly answer. And it was one of those questions that you were going to get in trouble.
Either way, it's a bad answer.
And she hesitated for a second, and she said, "Thank you for being honest." And I was like, "Wow, that's what it's like." I didn't say this, but I used dishonesty as a defense mechanism as a child. I had to use it, and so I lived by that my entire life. I am so grateful to God for repairing me, first and foremost, and what He's done in our marriage. And I know my first love is the Lord. I know my second love is my wife.
It might be golf.
No. It used to be golf.
I was going to say there was maybe a day when it was.
Absolutely. There is no doubt.
And the Lord has fixed that.
Amen. And I am so much. I don't know. 1 Thessalonians talks about you don't know when the time is or the place. I'm as healthy physically as I've ever been in my life, even though I've had my knee replacements and my hip replacement. I am as healthy mentally as I've ever been in my life, and I'm as healthy spiritually as I've ever been in my life. Do I got ways to go? Absolutely. The Lord's got great plans for me. I can't wait to see what they are. He's got great plans for us.
Yeah, I believe that.
And I can't wait to see what they are. So,
well, I want to thank you guys for sharing your story. I know this has not been especially easy, and but we're calling this stories of hope.
Absolutely.
And so, if you were to, be able to say just a few words to someone who maybe is in a place where they're praying your prayer, Dori, like, I just want a godly husband, or I just want out, or can it even get any better? I mean, I remember the days when I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone in that situation?
There's hope. There is hope. And first and foremost, your hope has to be found in Christ. First and foremost. Look at what God did for us. He sent His only Son to die on a brutal death to forgive my sins and your sins. The person that you're with may have done something very horrendous to you. But there is hope. If God could repair this, He can do there. There's no doubt that what He's done here is a miracle, and I don't give up. Is the thing first thing I would say is don't throw in the towel right away. Exhaust all possibilities. do the work yourself. Look inward first of all, because that little thing or that big thing that your spouse or your partner has done, maybe there's something going on with you that needs to be looked at as well. But trust him first and foremost.
Well, and just be patient,
Yes.
because I mean, I had to wait 18 years. And that's what I've got a friend that, is going through some stuff. And I'm like, you've got to be patient. And she's a strong Christian. And I'm like, you know how this works? You pray, and then you got to be patient. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, and just listen, stop talking for a minute and listen to what God's trying to tell you. Because if you just stop and actually listen, you'll be surprised what you hear.
That's right.
I mean, and it may come in threes like it does with me. I mean, you don't know, but listen, if we can make 20 years, and I told him I get another 20 out of you at least, there's hope. I mean, fourth marriage, third marriage, escort.
Hired the escorts.
Whatever, yeah. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, and to be able to hear everything that the Lord did along the way in your lives.
Yes.
And, there's several more people that I want to be able to have on this and be able to share their stories as well. But one of the reasons why I wanted you guys to go first is not that your marriage is perfect or complete.
No.
or anything like that.
No.
But like your story is so inspiring.
Thank you.
Because of what the Lord has done in your lives. And he's shown his faithfulness even amongst our unfaithfulness. And you guys said it. If there's hope for you guys, there's hope for anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lord does great and amazing things all the time. And anyway, I want to thank you guys so much for being on this. Any last words?
No, thank you, Russell, for trusting us to share our story. It was a little nervy to think about what we would be talking about, but guess what? God's going to use it for good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And can't wait to share more stories along the way. So, well, thanks so much for joining us and hanging in there for all 2 hours and 7 minutes of this. I hope your soul has been encouraged, and I hope that you find hope and that you find hope in the Lord.